Hi, Majenko. I'm trying to work out how to get 2 discs loaded at once. It's for gravitational pull of plot. Ah. Literally. This is what happens when you don't have side thrusters. You can't go sideways in the air. I'm really good at falling off the edges. the question is how to get that onto one of the physical machines. So hello Stone people. This is RISC-OS at this point 402, which is loaded over 3.7, just to make life fun. It's annoying that squash won't work. I'm trying to figure out how to get a working version of a game onto one of the physical machines from the emulated one, because it doesn't work on the physical machines at the moment, but this one should. The original version of RISC-OS predates Windows 3.1. The Archimedes came out in 1987. I'm not typing 1.3 meg in, Harold. I've got the problem that if I copy the file directly to a disk, it's going to have to be an IBM style disk, which the Archimedes will load, but it will lose all the file types, which makes it hard. Normally the way you get around this is to compress it, but I don't have a version of a compressor on here that works. I only have the uncompression tools, which makes life a little bit trickier. It's but we've managed to get a few things working on here. I would say Elite, but Elite pretty much works on everything. Well, one of the problems, Wolf, is that Acorn discs are larger than PCs. The 144 meg drive fitted to various PCs actually runs at 1.6 meg, because Acorns use 1024 byte sectors, not 512, so you can physically fit more on a disk. This wouldn't be a problem except for the fact that external floppy drives can't be accessed that way, a USB floppy drive. So the only way I've got to connect a floppy drive to the emulator is limited to the formats it can read and write, because you can't push the native format over the USB interface. The only real way of doing it is with a grease weasel, which would eliminate one problem, because if I had a disk image, the A5000, which is behind me here, has an HXC floppy emulator on it. So if I've got an image of the disk in the right format, this will load it instead of a floppy disk. And one of my plans is to make the 5000C the I call it GoTech, but VHXC and its own floppy drive natively, and then we can just copy Gotek disks images onto an actual floppy disk and shove it into the other machine. The problem I have is that the disk images that I have for these actual programs is not the same format. It's a proprietary format that runs through a program called ADFFS, which gives the machine an emulated floppy drive to read them. So instead of a hardware emulator, it's a software floppy emulator. But this can give some problems. For example, if a program is on 2 disks and you have to load, and I'll use E-Type for an example, the game is on disk 1, the tracks are on disk 2. When it's loaded disk 1, you can't get to the virtual disk interface to put disk 2 in. I'm still working on getting networking options. I have for the A5000 we have an actual full-size module. So that's the A5000's floppy interface, network interface. Because for this age of machine, you have 2 network options. You either run Acorn networking through eConnect, which is a module that plugs onto the board, or you need a full-size network card. By the time you get to the RISC PCs, they have a header on board for an internal NIC. Which is much smaller. It's pretty much the same card as that one, but on its own proprietary connector that goes straight on the board, doesn't take up one of your module slots, which is important on the RISC PC because the A5000 can take 4 standard width modules or 2 double width, and the standard RISC PC can only take 2 standard width. So one module in there takes up half your expansion. Hi Swan. So but a lot of these programs don't like the later processors, so a lot of the emulation drops off because it's running as a high one. In fact, a good example of that is Pipe Mania. This is running as a strong arm RISC PC, which has issues with older software. The simple reason is the original machines, although the ARM is a 32-bit processor, the original versions run in what's called 26-bit mode, and the top 6 bits are reserved for hardware registers and things like that. So there's software that calls things that should work, but they don't because those registers are moved on the later chips. And the 2 solutions are either a shim that allows emulation of those registers, or a patch to the software to clean up the code to make it 32-bit clean. But not everyone does it. So Pipe Mania, if you run it in this configuration, gives a memory error. If you downgrade the emulator to an ARM 700, it will run. So literally changing the processor over fixes the problem. This does become slightly more stupid in that I can actually do that with the physical machines, because I have a hardware ARM 700. This is the actual processor board. This is a 710 from those machines. So I have a 200 megahertz strong arm in one and a 233 in the other. This is, if I remember correctly, these are clocked at 54 megahertz, and this is the generation behind. It's but one of the weird bits about the RISC PC is it has two processor slots, so you can put the native processor in slot 0, and if you want to run Windows, you can put a 486 in the next slot and literally run Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 with a hardware processor. So you literally get to run Windows in a window on the desktop. It's, as you can see, this is a Texas Instruments 40 megahertz, which is a bit hampered on the RISC PC because the RISC PC only has I think it's 12 or 16 megahertz memory bus, so everything gets sort of a little bit bottlenecked at the RAM. Hi Smiley. Problem using a non-modem cable. I need something that can transfer the files on both machines. So you end up with the same problem of I need to find some software that I can get onto both machines and send the software. Now, if I'm sending it from the PC, yeah, I'm going to use a USB serial adapter. But I need something on the other end. And I don't actually have any terminal software on them. By the time of this version of RISC OS, you don't get a terminal emulator built in. So the only tools I've got are direct software for the machine that would have been provided with version of RISC OS, and by that point a terminal emulator wasn't one. You need the best way of thinking of it is the Internet Suite. Normally it'd be ANT, Internet Suite. Oh, it's not just that, Smiley. The terminal software was really clunky that was built into it. It was pretty much the same version that the BBC had on the BBC Master. So it's a completely command line based tool in a graphical operating system by the time you get to RISC OS. So it was showing its age. It has very limited transfer options. It would have been much better if they'd been able just to port something like Kermit. And there probably is a version of Kermit. Now, Heraldic, the answer to that is this emulation, no. The hardware machines, yes. There are versions of Wolf 3D and Doom that will run on the Strong Arms. The Strong Arm 233, even the 200, does have enough power to play Doom. There is a native conversion that was a commercial release. Same with Wolf 3D. It was a commercial release, and it will do it. It's not the best version, but it does run good enough to play. The problem there, Heraldic, is when you're running in the 486 mode, you now have a very slow video processor, because everything that the 486 is drawing has to be passed through SWI calls to RISC OS and then sent out the VIDC, the video controller. So yes, Doom will run on it, but the back end will run better than the video updates. Because you've literally go through 2 layers of processing for the game. It hits about 6 to 7, whereas native Doom on it runs up between 30 and 60. Which mode have I got this in? I think I'm running this in... Yeah, strong arm. So if I rerun it and drop the processor model, wrong one because these are still in temp. One of the things I am planning to do is to get the pre-built quadratic mouse adapter. Then instead of the Acorn mouse, which anyone who's familiar with older versions of Windows will find familiar, and you might think this looks like a Logitech mouse, and the reason for that is all the Acorn mice were built by Logitech. They are basically a Logitech bus mouse running as a quadratic bus mouse, as the bus mice did, with some of the wires switched. So you can, if you get hold of a Mouse Systems mouse port mouse, you can modify the cable to make it work on an Archimedes or a RIS PC by just swapping the right pins. I think it's the vertical that's reversed. Adrian Black hit this because someone sent him a 400 series an actual Archimedes, which came with a Bus Systems mouse, which he had to convert by swapping the wires to work as the proper Acorn one, and now it works fine. But you can track the generation of the mouse, because each generation of the Logitech mouse, when they produced the new one, like that's the third generation of Acorn mouse. When the new mice came out on the PC, the Archimedes got an update to the style of its mouse. So they're always 3-button mice. They're all ball mice, but the actual styling changes. So if I grab a Gen 2, so this is technically the same mouse. It runs in exactly the same way, exactly the same mode, but you can see there's a quite noticeable update to the styling and also to the usability, because Logitech put the ball at the very back, and with the mouse buttons this far back, it's not actually a great mouse to use. I can never remember what I'm meant to do doing this, because I know I'm meant to go a certain distance, but I never saw to get there. That was a mistake. It tells me the distance counted down. I've actually managed it this time. This is the first time I've got... No, still game over. I'm not sure. I can't remember, Peter. I can't remember how you get like to the next level. And Frymaster, you would hope that the graphics on the Archimedes, being a 32-bit platform, would be better than the 8-bit CPC. One of the things that always makes me laugh is if you ever look up the Archimedes on TV tropes, there is the most accurate and semi-silly comment that the Archimedes is the most important development in basically home computing and IT in general that no one knows about, simply because it is the processor. The ARM was designed for the Archimedes, so everything that has an ARM processor in it, from mobile phones, Chromebook and Macs, to half the subsystems in my car, are all related to the Archimedes. Every single one of them basically can trace their way all the way back, and the reason behind this is actually that is the original RISC PC. Basically, the original RISC PC has an ARM 600 processor, and a small company approached Acorn to use the design in a PDA. The problem was, when I say that a small company, it's Apple. Apple approached Acorn about using the ARM 600 chip. It was going into the Newton. But at the time, the two biggest educational suppliers of computers were Apple and Acorn in the UK. So they were literally competitors. So Acorn, making the Acorn RISC machine, spun off the chip section into its own company. They took 40% of the shares. Apple took 40% of the shares. VLSI, who made the chips, took 20%. The chip was renamed the Advanced RISC machine. Apple put it in the Newton and the ebook, and any other company could come along and buy it because ARM was now its own company. So everything you see with an ARM chip in it is related all the way back to the decision by Apple that they wanted to use the processor in the Newton. Yep, I've come across systems, Frymaster, where you plug in an external device and the controller is basically an ARM. The one that gets most people, there is a cut down version of the ARM. It's called the Thumb. It is to the full blown ARM like the 386SX is to the 386DX. For those who don't know, the 386DX is a 32-bit processor, but that made it expensive to design new boards for, so Intel came out with the SX, which is a 386 internally with basically a 286 external bus. So you could use your 286 motherboard, put a 386SX on it, and here's a 386. It was nobbled on memory writes and reads because you've got a 32-bit bus with a 16-bit interface, so you're going to lose 2 clock cycles for every memory transfer, but it was cheap. Well, the Thumb is a bit like that. It's an ARM internally with a cut-down external I/O system, and most people have never heard of it until you find out what the biggest user of it was, because it's the processor that runs for Game Boy Advance. So every Game Boy Advance technically has an ARM in it. This also explains why the later Nintendo handhelds use ARMs. They're already used to it from the Game Boy Advance. The programming environment is pretty much the same. The Thumb has a few quirks, but if you can program a Thumb, the ARM is nothing. If you program an ARM, you need to do a little bit of fiddling for the thumb, but it's not a massive change. It's just you have to take into account some of the limitations of a design, and off you go. The silly one, Majenko, there is an interface chip that can work with the ARM and the thumb. It's called the wrist. Of course, it could be that this is only the demo version. I don't think it is, but it's the sort of thing. Well, you couldn't have a wrist piece at Majenko, it'd only be the interface chips. It'd be like trying to build a PC with a SCSI card and no processor. Although, having said that, I have had some SCSI cards that have had enough processing power on them that they could have run as a PC. I think it was Bus Logic. They did an ISA bus mastering SCSI card, and it's got a 186 on it. So technically, it has a full-blown, almost IBM PC compatible processor, but there's a few quirks with the 186. But yes, you can run DOS and Windows on it. It doesn't have any video input or output or keyboard controllers, but technically, ooh, screwed up there already. Too late. Well, the classic one, of course, Majenko, is Commodore. How do you build a disk drive for the VIC-20 in the Commodore 64, or indeed the PET? Well, you put most of the computer in the floppy drive. Now, the only thing this doesn't appear to have is a quit mechanism. So I'm actually going to have to drop the entire emulator. Let's go for... see if I can do better than last time. Bring the game music back up a bit. Back to the days when you had to put parallax scrolling into an intro like that, otherwise people didn't believe you could do it. I think that's just scenery. Yeah. That didn't go too well. Let's load that one back again. Touch. Lost a man to getting a roof on his head. Fudge. See who I've missed. Got a feeling this might be a big map. Yes. Well, to be fair, I'm doing terribly. Although, to be fair, this was always the point of cannon fodder, was to point out that pretty much doesn't matter how well you think you're doing, anyone can die in this game. And often does. And it doesn't have to be enemy action. Pick up the rockets before I blow them up. One of the things I always forget is because of the way it does the mouse controls. To throw a grenade or fire a rocket, you fire the machine gun and then click the move button, so you can't move while firing. Because the most common outcome is, of course, you blow yourself up. Just like that. and perfectly demonstrated there. I'm really good at killing two guys right at the start, aren't I? Okay, that's not the better way round either. Having a faster way to switch between the secondary ammunition would be good as well. No, I think I've killed them all again. Running out of recruits. Right, so we've got this guy down the bottom. Let's take out him so we can take out him. See if we can deal with these. Nope. Can't remember. No, didn't look at that. In fact, it's completely changed the display mode, which is nice of Windows. Just take that down to now with this, let me put the second disc in. It's not actually reading the keyboard. That might just be an emulator fault. You can understand why we call them feeps when you see the name of the actual file. So you've got wavesynth beep. These are the standard sound samples built into Risk OS, and they pretty much haven't changed since Alpha. So. The string lib always sounds the same, but WaveSynth Beep is like the typical, well, atypical Acorn sound, because the Archimedes cannot actually produce sound. It's a internal wavetable system with no samples. It can't even beep. It is completely dependent on the sound samples being loaded, hence the defaults being in ROM. But this is why things like Cocognizer are so wonderful. That's a Risk OS tracker, because the sound system might as well have been designed for trackers. You know, you've got 8 voices with multiple volume and panning levels that play samples at any pitch and speed. And if that's not a tracker, what is? Oh, I have got Doc Hunt on here. Wow, that does not like the speed. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the duck. That is designed for... it's Duck Hunt Plus. So it's designed for an 8 megahertz machine. And it's running at... which one of my mode am I running in? So, it's running at 200 on a strong arm. And it's designed for an arm 2. The original version was Duck, which is a duck who swims and quacks along the taskbar. Duck Hunt Plus added the shotgun. So, just like Majenko's bot, if it gets annoying, you shoot it. Some of the other things people manage to produce, the maximum size of the taskbar icons is such that it's possible to write an entire game of Space Invaders in the icon for your program, and nothing in the design spec for Risk OS says that the toolbar icon has to be static, so you can do full animation down here. And so there's a race, the ones I've come across in the past, there's a racing game, Space Invaders. When you move off the top, all bets are off. Someone did an entire mini film, literally a western, that played out on the top of the bar, and it would lay down tracks and run trains through, and the train would get robbed, and the sheriff would have to come and try and catch the thieves, and all this laid out on the top of a bar. The other classic one that was ported is Nico. So you can have the proper Nico cat running around the Risk OS desktop and pawing at the windows. It is excessively cute on Risk OS, especially with the new look interface, where you've got the textured window controls, and you've got the poor little kitty pawing to be let into the windows. Right, well, I'm going to have another think about how I'm going to get Zool off this and onto there. But thank you everyone for turning up. Thank you to everyone who came in with the raid and stuck around. And I will see people the next time I have an idea. You'll know when it is, because you'll probably hear the gears burning. So... Right. Thank you for dropping by, and goodbye for now.